And many of you know who've been coming these last few weeks, I've been reflecting on the Buddhist teachings on impermanence. And as I've been saying, this is as much as probably anything, the central theme of the Buddhist teachings. The teachings about stabilizing present moment awareness in order to open with curiosity, with kindness, to the underlying truth that this moment, any moment, is in motion. And in that sense, then it's unreliable, ungovernable, uncertain. Now, this chant that we've been doing, we didn't get a chance to do it today, and it's a simple chant that's used a lot of times at Buddhist funerals. It's on page 29 of the Common Ground Chant book if you want to track it down, where it says, all conditioned things arise and pass away. Understanding this deeply leads to the greatest happiness, which is peace. And we could, it would be appropriate to ask, well, I know that everything arises and passes away. I think I understand this deeply. How come I'm not experiencing the greatest happiness and peace? Right? Well, it's one thing to understand it intellectually. Oh yeah, that makes sense. Things come and go. I was younger, now I'm older. It was Saturday, now it's Sunday, and on like that. But it's another thing to really ground that reflection that things come and go, moment to moment. And this is what I want to talk about today, the liberating effect of taking the teachings on impermanence and really developing some real integrity. So we're really connecting moment to moment through that lens, like we're training the mind to be curious about what's arising and what's ceasing, to really see whatever experience is sort of front and center, to really see it as something that has arisen and that will pass on. Now, the reason we often dismiss this deeper, more pervasive truth of impermanence is each moment of our experience is conditioning the next moment. So on the surface, things really appear to be continuous. Like Sunday morning for me, for you, right? It has this appearance of, oh yeah, this is still Sunday morning, because the way my mind is thinking, the way my mind is perceiving, I'm really experiencing what we call Sunday morning in this idea of this thing called Sunday morning, which has a permanent, fixed sense. We're just not yet interested enough or have this refined and full of care attention to the actuality of here and now, like sensation and sound and thought and other aspects of our present moment experience. And really see that moment by moment, things are bursting forth and arising and being known. And in order for this moment to be known, something has fully and completely ceased. It's gone away. It's no longer there. About 40 minutes ago or whatever it was, I was fretting about the technical difficulties. I had waves of sadness and all kinds of emotional reactions. Oh, poor me. Why does this happen to me? It's not fair. Who's at fault? You know how it goes, right? So there were those dramas. And now those dramas just don't exist. I don't feel them, see them in the space of my heart and mind anymore. Where did they go? Like sand through the fingers. Nothing really lasts very long. If we took the last week or even just this morning, how many moods, how many attitudes, how many frames did we live with? How many marks have there been today, right? For each of us, how many existences have there been? already today. And this is a perception we can cultivate in a way where we have to cultivate the perception that things arise and pass away and are not that personal. We cultivate that perception not because it's a construction to undo the habit of seeing things as being permanent, being me and mine and I in a permanent way. That habit is deeply entrenched, so we receive the Buddhist teachings, which saying, hey, learn to see things as they are. And to do that, you might need to contemplate this perception of impermanence, of the impersonal nature, the unsatisfactory nature, right? Of when we cling, things get tight, they become unsatisfactory. When the mind is dependent, looking for solid ground in a world that's in flux, that's changing. So we use these perceptions to correct these deep distortions that I think I mentioned last week. The distortion of where we tend to see permanence in what is actually impermanent, a changing process. See self in what is actually impersonal. See satisfaction in what is essentially not satisfying in a lasting sense. And we tend to see beauty in what is neither really beautiful nor ugly, it's just what it is. So any of the sort of dualistic good and bad, right? The way the mind frames things in that dualistic way, it's relative. It's not like what we consider good or bad, beautiful or ugly. That's not essentially true in some permanent way. It's just how we've been conditioned to see things. And we could be conditioned to in a different way. And then what we see as being ugly wouldn't be ugly. We see poop on the ground, ugly. You know, a dung beetle that eats poop, you know, sees poop on the ground, they're happy, right? So different perception, different ways. I mentioned last week, I think it was from Sylvia Boorstein, the simple line, courage is the Buddhist word for faith, or for hope rather. Courage is the Buddhist word for hope. And this is this sort of fearlessness. Yeah, I really want to align with the truth of things. It's, you know, what this deepening understanding of what in Buddhism we call dukkha, the unsatisfactory nature of experience. It really has to do where the wisdom is starting to notice how much stressful work it is for me to keep having to imagine that things are different than they are, like permanent when they're not really permanent, self when they're not really self, satisfying when they're not really satisfying. I'm getting that way around food. You know, I like my food like most of us living beings do. But, you know, it's harder to get excited about like food as some sort of experience that's going to make me happy. You know, even a really nice meal might be pleasant in a really pleasant way, but somehow it doesn't really make much of a difference. And that's sort of interesting because, you know, the way we've been conditioned, the way at least I've been conditioned, is to look to sense experience, especially, of course, pleasant sense experience, as if I'm really going to get something that's lasting, that's meaningful, whether it's in terms of a nice meal or a nice occasion with our loved ones or a nice whatever possession, getting rid of something, and then, you know, that endless promise. And then we're taught, and often people in Buddhist circles chant these 5 remembrances. We do them here on Sunday morning, you know, usually once a month. And I think the 4th one goes something like, all that is mine, all that is beloved and pleasing will become otherwise, will become separated from me. And that's a powerful reflection. And it doesn't mean we shouldn't receive the next meal or receive the next gift or go out and buy something or go out and do something with a friend. It just means that how does our life change when we're contemplating impermanence, even while going shopping? Oh, all that is mine, all that I purchase, whatever becomes beloved and pleasing to me will become otherwise. It's not a landing place where once I get what I'm going to buy, or once I have this time with my friend, then I've, I've fundamentally changed because of that experience. So this is what we're being, with these teachings we're reflecting on this fall. This is what we're contemplating. How might keeping impermanence in mind change our lives? How do we become different because we've become interested in this more refined, underlying reality of change? That everything, absolutely everything is in motion. Nothing stays the same. So now I'm going to train my heart and mind to keep that in mind. One of my teachers, Venerable Analio, a German monk, who's now in residence at the Barry Center for Buddhist Studies, which is on the same campus as Insight Meditation Center, Insight Meditation Society in Barry, Massachusetts, a place that I've done a lot of practice over the years and teach now. And so at the Barry Center for Buddhist Studies, you can take courses with Venerable Analio as well as other places. But he has a very simple teaching around impermanence, just almost like a mantra that you can just bring up when you want to clarify, like, what am I doing in my life? In terms of the spiritual path, what am I doing? What is the essence of this awakening path that the Buddha taught? Ajahn Sumedho would say something like, everything arises and passes away and is not self, which is just a paraphrase of the Buddhist teachings. And Venerable Analio's little kind of reflection is, keep calmly knowing change. Okay, honey, all you have to do is keep calmly knowing that things are changing. So how now in this moment, this lived experience of body and mind right now, how can we be aware that things are changing? Just aware that this talk, and then maybe some of you will stay for the small group discussion. Hopefully Shannon Gibney, who's going to facilitate the breakout groups for people who want, is still online here and can do that. But in any case, whatever this is together that we have, it's in motion. It's a changing, yep, Shannon's here, good. It's a changing process, right? It's very alive. So we casually use language like, oh yeah, this is the Sunday morning practice group at, through Common Ground Meditation Center. And it makes it seem like an edifice, a fixed thing. But it's really a dance that all of us are doing together, and these teachings passed down through the generations of women and men and other folks before us, they're landing here in this conversation through my voice right now, through your own sort of cognitive processes and emotional processes as you're hearing these words and reflecting and living, right? It isn't a thing. It's a changing process. It's an unfolding dance of, this indescribable, this imponderable sort of movement, what we often say, these causes and conditions, changing, impersonal. And when we say unsatisfactory, we don't mean that the moment is bad. We mean that getting dependent, trying to use any moment as solid ground is frustrating and undependable and stressful. Like I think I mentioned last week or maybe 2 weeks ago, this teaching I heard from Ajahn Thanisaro, a Western Buddhist monk, a wonderful teacher and scholar, and he was quoting one of his teachers, one of the Thai forest masters of the last century, um, that mountains are only heavy if you try to lift them. But it's a really um, it's a powerful little image, right? Mountains, yeah, intellectually we know mountains are heavy, but experientially, mountains aren't heavy unless you go over and try to lift one. Then they're heavy. And experience, our experience as a human being, is suffering only when we try to get something from a sense experience. If we're going out for a nice meal together, a nice conversation, or taking a nice walk together, or I go home and try to have a nice nap, right? There's suffering when I want something from that sense experience, something that's lasting, something that is me or mine. Then, because the mind is dependent, trying to get something, then there's frustration, then there's stress. But we can live in this world of changing sense experience, sometimes pleasant, sometimes unpleasant. We can live with sense experience. There's nothing fundamentally off or bad or wrong about embodied existence. Where the cause of suffering arises is when this wrong view, this wrong idea gets established in our hearts, that there's a me who's dependent, who's looking, as that, I think, country western song goes, looking for love in all the wrong places. We're looking for refuge, for certainty in what is not certain, what is not really a refuge. And we see this, from some distance. It's relatively easy for us to see this in other people. When we watch a friend looking for solid ground in a romantic relationship, or we see somebody who's aging looking for solid ground by trying to look younger, or we see somebody looking for permanence or safety and having a lot of money, and getting miserly or stingy with their money and just trying to feel secure, or somebody doing it with their home, and just like all the security apparatus for their home, and super glass on their windows that can't be broken and can't be shot through, won't lose any heat and keeps it cool in the summer, and and all these sort of kitchen gadgets that will never break down. And I was talking to a family member yesterday about the Vitamix. Yeah, some of you know these kind of high-powered blenders that are sort of indestructible almost until they break down. But the idea is like they last a long time. Oh, that I've got some solid ground until we don't, until the blender breaks down, and on it goes. So the Buddha is basically suggesting, well, why not make that reality of impermanence front and center? And as I've been saying, how does that change us? When we check it out, is it actually liberating? Does it lighten the heart? Does it allow us to live in a more creative and kind, nimble way, compassionate way, when we keep impermanence in mind? When we forget about impermanence, we get self-absorbed, because we often get self-absorbed because we feel like I've got to take care of myself by sort of locking down permanence, and then I'll take care of other people. But see, we never really get there. So we never really get to looking around and realizing, hey, you know what? It's not easy being a human being. And I care about all these other people around me, including myself. And what can be done to sort of make this changing, uncertain, vulnerable existence as human beings, what can we do to make this more beautiful, more kind, more just for those who are being taken advantage of? How can we make this dance, this changing, uncertain dance, a more beautiful and fair and just and kind-hearted dance? And that happiness we can have, like how we dance, is the happiness we get as human beings, not any kind of permanence. And in this way, we're learning, as I've been saying these last few weeks, composure with impermanence, composure with uncertainty, composure with vulnerability. So we're learning, usually first and foremost, in places that are not so intense, right? We're learning to let our heart, the sensitive heart, be touched by what's happening. You know, Shannon just left text. So I'm remembering, Shannon's one of those people with two relatively young, elementary school age children. And, that's the age where child, I don't know about Shannon's kids, but when children aren't getting their way, they'll sort of either say directly or indirectly, like, I don't love you, mommy, or, you know, I'm, you make me mad, something like that. And so, are we willing to let those moments and, oh, that really hurts, but I'm not afraid of my heart being touched. And one of the reasons we can learn not to be afraid to let our heart be touched with things that are painful is we know that it isn't the last chapter. It's like right now it really hurts, but in the next moment the child may be, I was walking here to Common Ground this morning and some person was raking the leaves and some little, looked like about 3 years old, was right in the middle of the pile of leaves. And it's one of those classic scenes where parent and child look really happy together, just kind of hanging out on a nice fall day and the dry leaves, big pile of dry leaves. And for the child, just a natural playhouse hanging out there, right? Until the next moment. And I had the thought after that, not having had my own kids, like, oh yeah, that's a real pleasure, isn't it? That sort of sharing love in that kind of light, uh, not dramatic, just delighting in these ordinary pleasures. But what makes it really beautiful is not needing that pleasure to be more than what it is, right? Because we could easily ruin it by, okay, let's restage this. I want to capture it with video, you know, so that I can own this pleasure. Because that 3-year-old, how many more falls is that child going to want to play in a big pile of leaves before they think it's stupid or whatever, you know? Or we're tired and we want the kid to do the raking, and on and on. So we want to somehow capture it. Same thing with peak colors. It was interesting. We had a work week out at Prairie Farm, Common Grounds retreat property, just east here of the Twin Cities in western Wisconsin. And Matthew, the caretaker, and I were looking at the hills to the north, which means we were looking on the south side of that hill. And it really looked like, oh yeah, past peak, kind of more gray and brown, not so much of that vibrant yellow and red. And then we look at the hill to the south. So we're looking at the north side of the hill and it's like peak, and it was just interesting because we were looking one way and we are thinking, oh, past peak, got to wait until next fall. And there's that sort of like, oh, wanting it to linger, not wanting to go so fast. So it's just sort of interesting how we are with things that just in their very nature are changing. And what happens when instead of living in this more diluted way, where we think we're better off if things were permanent, we really embrace, learn how to be intimate, learn how to be relaxed, and learn how to continuously perceive the truth of change, whatever we're looking at. There's a simple little story that's told by Ajahn Chah, who had this great simple teaching. This is his little mantra, like keep calmly knowing change, from Venerable Analayo and Ajahn Sumedho's everything arises and passes away and is not self. Ajahn Chah had this simple phrase, still flowing water. It's a little bit of a koan, to imagine water that's still and flowing. And it's really a little teaching for how we understand the space of our life right here, or the mind, you could say, the heart, that there's something moving. Our experience is in motion, but there's something still. And we don't even have to say what it is that's not moving. It's better not to name it. But that's actually, when the mind is settled, that's actually our experience. That's why we can be aware with wisdom that everything is changing, right? We can be aware of that. I'm not saying awareness doesn't change. I'm just saying that that little teaching, still flowing water, can be a little gateway to be more intimate and to experience this moment in a more liberated or not fixed way, coming more into alignment with things. And so this is really our homework, to not just hear the teachings on impermanence, but to really hear the invitation that contemplating, using the Buddhist teachings on impermanence, that everything comes and goes and is not self, that every experience internally, like a thought or an emotion or a memory, and externally, every experience without exception is uncertain, unreliable, arises and passes, and really contemplating or checking out, like, is that liberating? Does that change affect my heart in the direction of happiness, in the direction of peace? And the more confidence we have on that reflection, the more we get drawn in, where we can, in moments when our attention, the sort of continuity of mindfulness, what we sometimes call samadhi or stability of awareness, mindful awareness, when that's really strong, then we can basically observe the present moment in a more refined, sensitive way. And we start to intuit how what feels like a continuous me having experience, we really see more clearly, at least on an intuitive level, this intuitive sense that this moment is quite new and fresh. So sometimes we really highlight the beginnings of experience. We just see how, and you might have had this, like if you've been on retreat or had some period of time in your life where your experience has been relatively simple. Maybe you were camping or just not doing a lot of talking or had a lot of work, and your mind just naturally got more sensitive and more mindful. And you might notice that everything just seems more alive, more vibrant, more naturally. There's awe, being awe-struck, um, as you just do ordinary things. And it can be that in those moments, it's because of this more refined and continuous mindful awareness that the mind is beginning to intuit or sense how the present moment bursts into existence and then the next moment bursts. And so it has a very bright, a very alive quality, this. When the mind, for whatever reasons, but there would be reasons, starts to sense the arising of the present moment. And of course, that arising is happening and happening and happening and happening very quickly, moment by moment. Other times, wisdom in the mind might just naturally start intuiting, sensing the ending. And whatever you're aware of, whatever you're doing, what is sort of getting the mind, getting wisdom's attention, is that this is like sand through the fingers. It's ending. Just like in this moment, like what you might be sensing is how this talk and this community gathering, whatever it is, being online like this, is like sand through the fingers. It's already, we're getting close to the end. We're within 9 minutes of ending here. And just sensing the ephemeral nature of it. Some of that, for some of you rather, that will be a good thing because you're maybe ready to go on to lunch. Others wanting it to linger, oh no, this is so nice to be together like this. But we want to just see how that goes. And we actually, in particular with feeling tone, so this is a little bit sort of a refinement on the homework. So generally, the reflection I'm encouraging this week as we continue looking at the Buddhist teachings on impermanence is to just take up the Buddhist challenge where he says, contemplating impermanence, seeing the impermanent nature is really liberating. But it's not the idea of impermanence, it's using the idea to affect how we meet, how we're intimate, how we're honest with our own embodied experience, emotional, internal thoughts, memories, and as well as the external, the seeing, the hearing, the touching, what we call the body. How all of that is in motion. Is that liberating? So the refinement to this so-called homework assignment is in particular with feeling tone. So when we're having an unpleasant feeling tone, it'd be very, very wonderful to just, oh yeah, this is an unpleasant experience now. And then just contemplate, is this unpleasantness permanent or impermanent? Is it changing or is it fixed? Here's a little teaching from the Buddha on that. When a person has abandoned ignorance and aroused clear seeing, then, with the fading of that ignorance and the arising of that clear seeing, one does not cling to anything in the world. Not clinging, one is not agitated. Not being agitated, one personally attains release, nibbana. And then it goes on, if one feels a pleasant feeling, an unpleasant feeling, or a neutral feeling, like any feeling whatsoever, one understands this feeling is impermanent. One understands this feeling is not to be held to. One understands it is not to be delighted in. If one feels a pleasant, an unpleasant, or neutral feeling, one feels that feeling unattached. So this is the refinement of the homework. Can we get interested in feeling really intimate? Oh yeah, I'm feeling kind of peaceful, neutral. Oh yeah, this is pleasant right now, or this is unpleasant right now. And then just check out, just ask the question, is this feeling that's here? I'm not trying to make a change. I just want to get close and see if it is changing. We had pleasant experiences probably already today, unpleasant experiences already today, neutral experiences already today. And it really, keeping that in mind especially about the feeling tone, it really is a deeper way of integrating, having a more honest relationship with the uncertain, unreliable nature. And it moves us in the direction of not being pushed around by sense experience. So we always wonder, how can I keep showing up in a world where it isn't the way I want it to be? Clearly this world I don't know about you, and you'd have to wonder about someone who says the world is the way they want it to be, in terms of the outward conditions. And there's just so much suffering and so much injustice. And even when conditions are great for a particular person, they can't be counted on. So, it's appropriate to relate and understand that what's playing out is clearly not perfect. It is the way that it is. It makes sense. Can't be other than the way it is. but it's not necessarily the way we'd want it to be, right? But it is the way that it is. So to keep showing up to that world where there is so much that needs engagement, right? It really frees us up not to be torn apart, not to be beaten up by the waves of pleasantness or unpleasantness or neutrality. So we can really do what the moment seems to be asking us to do without my mind being thrown off by the moment being pleasant or unpleasant or neutral. Like, it's a good example with the technical difficulties, and I'll just end with this point that we had earlier today. Some of you maybe came in later, but it was a mess for the first 15 minutes or so, 20 minutes. And I mentioned earlier, I had all kinds of different emotions, including a very strong sense of just wanting to give up. Like, how it's just the my cumulative relationship to technology, and I see myself as being relatively technically competent. I mean, I survive. Um, but just thinking that helplessness and giving up is sort of a useful strategy. Like I'm the one who gives up. I'm the one who can't do this. I'm the one who lives in a world where technology is not to be trusted. You know, and my mind wanted that as a fixed truth. Okay, I may not like this truth, but at least it's dependable and I can own it. This is the way that it is. Technology sucks, you know. And I saw my mind inclining to that. And I saw this other one, which was, well, maybe just keep dancing, just keep trying stuff. And I did. I just kept trying stuff. And in doing that, I started noticing other things I could do to fix the situation, the technical situation. And that's what we have to do. We have to keep dancing, keep showing up. We may not like the current chapter, but it's still in motion. So before we end, I just want to remind folks that we've been offering some small group discussions now after Sunday. We have Shannon Gibney today, one of our leaders and someone who's been teaching a wonderful mindfulness and writing workshop periodically over the last few years, hopefully again in the future. And Omkar, I know, has been helping out, and Nancy and somebody else I'm forgetting right now, sorry. But we have some wonderful leaders that are facilitating the breakup into small groups. So if you have 20 minutes, Shannon will be posting the link if they haven't already. And I'll keep the live stream open so you'll see that link when it gets posted in the live chat. Just click on that Zoom link and you'll end up in the Zoom room. You'll meet Shannon, and then in just a moment, Shannon will divide the group into groups of 4 or 5, something like that. And you have about 15 or 20 minutes just to chat together. It's just a nice way to meet people in the community and also to start to integrate some of the ideas that have really struck home and are resonating with you, clarify it with your Dharma friends. Community is so important, and during this time of COVID, we have to get really creative. I mentioned in the weekly email, which if you're going to be part of the community, you might want to get on that weekly email. Just go to our website. There's a place to sign up to get the weekly email. That we're creating a group. Haya and some other leaders are going to be creating a group to provide some more social contact for people, especially those of you who are feeling isolated because of COVID, but any of you, even those of you who are raising children at home and want to connect with other adults. So if you've been around the community for a while, have maybe done some residential retreat practice, and would like to be in that community group that provides some social connection for those in the community who would like it, just let me know or let the center know, and we'll be setting that community group in motion this next week or two. So take care, everybody. Really nice to be with everyone. And thank you, Shannon, for organizing the small groups today. Have a good week.